Yo, can you hear me? Oh wait, talk, Garrett. I think you're muted.
I can unmute myself. How
There
about
you go.
that? Is that better?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We're in here. Let's go.
We are in here. Sorry about that. I did not think that my headphones were gonna die.
We're good. We're good. We're in here now. We're in here now. What's going on?
Are we live?
We are live. And I
Oh,
have to
nice.
switch the screen over. And we're here. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Per request,
got
let's
that.
not dive into anything too deep. Let's give 5 minutes or so and just chit
That's
chat
right.
for a minute. Let everybody get in here. What's going on? What's happening in the office? I'm obviously at my home office right now, but what's going on over there? Anything good? Anything juicy? Any fun events?
Honestly, the past 3 days have been very quiet here. We got some staff out of office. Melanie, the other partner, has been out of office, so we've been a little slim here in the office. It's been good though. Sometimes quiet is good, able to sit down and just focus on work and stuff. So
Yeah.
it has not been necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Sometimes no news is good news. It's like if nothing's happening and it's slow, take advantage of it. Try and get some stuff done, knocked out, because we know it'll pick up very soon.
That and just it's this is our slow time, but it's kind of like whenever no one's in office, you're able to just kind of lock in and focus when you need to. Sometimes, I mean, it's nice to have people here. It's nice when you're here, we can catch up and chat, but sometimes it gets us distracted. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, but things have been good. What about you? How has your week been? We haven't talked a ton since last week.
No, not a ton. We had our whip yesterday and kind of walked through projects and stuff like that. But personally speaking, we haven't even worked out together in a couple of days now. So that's been, I don't know. It's just been different. It's been like during tax season, we had a good thing going. I mean, really, even during tax season, we didn't have as much going from a personal standpoint, working out wise and all that, because our schedules kind of got switched up on us. But no, it's just been good. Just been different though. You get used. I think I'll say this, like from a content creation perspective, I get, not, it's not the end of the world, but it can be kind of miserable. Literally just like you're sitting in the same room in your same house. You haven't quote unquote touched grass. You're just like here constantly all the time. It wears on you, man. Like at least at the office, I can get up and walk and like I can leave and go to lunch and grab something, or I can come and talk to you or Jamari and whoever's in the office. And you take all that for granted. You work from home. It's always quiet, but sometimes that quiet is like really loud. It's like just you here. And
I'm with you though, on like that whole get out and go do something, because I'm kind of the same way. I'll get tired of sitting still. Interestingly enough, I never really expected that I would have like an office job, like a desk job where I came in and like worked, which it is nice because we're flexible and I can work from home or whatever. And like we have flexible schedules. We're not just here from 9 to 5 every day, but um, yeah, it's interesting because I've always been somebody who's liked to get out and about and move around.
yeah. Well, I think we've got probably whoever's going to be in here by now. Other people may come and go as we talk, but do you want to hop into the first topic?
Yeah, we can jump right in. I mean, obviously we're wanting to do these live, but it will definitely be up on YouTube. So anybody who's not catching it live is fine. We did have a request, like you said at the beginning, when we first went live, of to wait a little bit to let people get in here. I think that'll probably become more applicable the more people we have find out about the podcast. But I hope everybody's doing well today. For those of you guys who don't know, my name is Joseph Lingle. I'm a manager here at Game On Financial, and I'm joined by Garrett. Garrett, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I own Game On Financial. So Joseph and I work pretty much hand in hand, servicing all of our clients. It's been a great experience. We also have Jamarian. Shout out Jamarian. Jamarian with us, but between the three of us, we pretty much service all of our Game On Financial clients. And yeah, it's been a pleasure so far, and we're moving into the podcast and all that stuff. So it's just been so much fun doing all this. This has been great.
Yeah, no, with a good transition into some content and stuff to try to get build the brand a little bit. We obviously do accounting work, but we're gamers at heart, and we love the gaming content creation industry. So
Yep.
just getting this podcast going to talk about some topics that are maybe hot topics currently, or things that we know some about that we feel like we can share value and just educate some people on some stuff that maybe they don't know about. So, um, with that, yeah, let's hop into the first stuff. And before we hop into our big topic for the day, which is going to be um, talking about organizations and esports a little bit and how that whole thing works. Some hot topics at hand are COD Champ starts today. What's your opinions on that, Gary? You gonna be watching?
Oh yeah, I'll be dialed in. The best thing about our job, is being able to like watch these things as we're working. So I'll always have COD champs pulled up, and then any other leagues and stuff like that. But just COD champs starting, I'm so excited because I've watched most of the majors, a ton of the online matches where I could, and
Yep.
that got me through a lot of like tax season and stuff like that, and being able to watch all those guys. And I've followed the season pretty closely, so I'm really excited. I would have loved to have gone this year. And
hmm
I know you can probably relate. I think next year, you and I have already talked about making a push to be able to attend, a lot of these events. I'd love to go to all of them, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
and, on this topic, like London, Royal Ravens, like, have you heard anything about that? I'm sure you have, obviously.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like,
No,
we
yeah.
haven't legitimately talked about this. Like, a lot of these topics we've talked about beforehand, but this is one we haven't actually discussed before. So that's
Well, and
pretty.
it's not even just that situation, but I mean, even they're talking about Florida being bought out and maybe
Yeah.
being Miami Heretics next year. There's a lot of changes going on in the CDL,
Roster
but
Mania coming up. Yeah, I mean, like, but it all caps off here with or it starts off with COD champs. Ironically, like,
yep.
we're getting into the off season and all these changes coming up, but COD champs is like, we still got to get through that, and this is the
Yeah.
most important event. It's exciting, man.
Yeah,
I'm ready to
I think
watch.
I am too, man. I'm excited for it, and I think that's something for those people who don't follow COD esports very much, very closely. Maybe I know a lot of people in our industry have watched COD or played COD, and maybe that was their entry into video games in general. But um, COD Champs is kind of going to be the kicking off point for that roster mania. And this year, longer than ever, this is the earliest COD Champs has been in like quite a few years. This will be like the longest off season that they have. So I'm interested to see how roster mania will like kind of unfold. But COD roster mania, for those of you who don't know, is very jam packed with drama, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about some of the moves that happen
We'll have
as
to.
it goes, because COD Twitter goes crazy whenever that stuff starts happening.
I love it,
But
man.
yeah,
It's
exciting.
yeah, it's a great time of year. Like, all the majors this year have been fun to watch. COD Champs is going to be probably, in my opinion, the best of all of them, right? As it should be. But I mean, just genuinely, like, the talent that's going to be there playing, and like, kind of the storylines that have built up this year. I'm really
Right.
looking forward to Optic playing. I'm looking forward to FaZe getting out there. Ready to
I
see.
hope we get an Optic Phase finals. That would be awesome.
That would be dope. I kind of want to see Optic and LA Thieves. I want to see Optic, kind of get their revenge, because LA's kind of mopped the floor with
Yeah.
them in at least LAN events.
Right.
So, LA, and this year is especially good because like all the teams are good. Like, LA,
Yeah.
Optic, FaZe, they are all very, very talented. And
It's a highly competitive league now. I mean, it
yeah,
really is. It's there. Any team could win. I mean, everybody says the teams at the bottom, never have a chance. And yeah, obviously, there's a little bit of a skill gap there. But COD has become very, very competitive in the
yeah.
past, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
New York looks good.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 major wins. So
Yeah.
like they're kind of a sleeper, just very talent. Like, there's just talent across the board on a lot of these teams, and it's going to be fun to watch. I'm super excited. I'm a Optic fan at heart. So I do hope they pull it out, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I think overall there will be a lot of good games that are played. Be a lot of fun matches.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, only other like big news thing that dropped this week, as far as some of the stuff creators that we work with and follow and stuff, because we do work with a lot of Call of Duty creators, is new Warzone map. I saw a lot of people playing that yesterday as it dropped, and mixed emotions on that. I think that game is, and we could probably talk about that game in general a lot, but I mean, I think that game is seen a lot of ups and downs this year, and they've tried their best to revitalize it. Hopefully, this map does that a bit, but yeah, I don't know. What's your opinions on that? I don't know if you watched much of it yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't watch much of it yesterday. I was like yesterday for me work wise, I was locked in, and I knew I was going to be watching a lot of champs. So it's probably one of the first updates for Warzone I haven't like watched on day one.
Sure.
I think back to when Warzone 2 was being announced. You and I were sitting in my office, and we were
Yep.
like watching all the play testing and stuff like that. And I think it was basically the closed beta where they had a bunch of content creators out there playing it.
Was COD next, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. And that was awesome. And now I think about this one, and like I didn't even really care to watch it. So
Yeah.
I think that right there kind of tells you the state that it's in. I'm not like gonna sit here and bash the game, but as somebody who has limited time to be able to play these things, I'm gonna play what I want to play, and it's just not up there. I will say the updates look
And
good.
it's currently Diablo because you've been grinding, son.
Dude, it's been so much fun. Yeah. So I just switched from one Activision game to another, and it's funny because listen to this, that community, bro, they've nerfed a couple of things now into the ground. Not into the ground, but they've nerfed them pretty hard. And listening to that community complain about nerfs, and I'm like, well, it's Activision Blizzard. Like, if something's fun, they're probably going to stop it.
It's cool too. I would say just from a 50,000 foot view, we do get to see that a lot, right? Because obviously we play games, and we talk about that a little bit on the podcast. But just working with creators and stuff, we kind of get to see all these different sub communities of different games and different things that really have developed into their own subcultures inside of gaming and content creation in this industry that we work in.
Yeah.
It's actually really cool because so many people I think get caught up in like the CS community or the COD community, the Apex community, Diablo being new, that's got a whole section of people around it, and it's League. I mean, all these, and it's just interesting because they all kind of share some of the same gripes and complaints sometimes. But
yeah, I was a kind of a feel good story from that actually. Not to deviate too far from the new Warzone map. I will say before I leave this, the Warzone, it's not just the map, but the updates themselves. I think adding 50 additional health, stuff like that. I think there were some good updates. Yep. I think overall the update was with the new map was good. I think the new map looks awesome. From what I haven't seen a lot of gameplay on it, but I saw like when they released the gameplay trailer and all that. It looks cool. Like it does give me like Verdansk vibes, so that's fun. But going to go ahead.
You're good.
I was going to say, going to the feel good story. Like I was watching a YouTube creator who plays mostly Diablo, right? And this just shows you, kind of we get so drawn into the COD community because we've been playing a lot, and recently Apex too. But one Diablo creator, he was basically saying, because Diablo 3 was out for like 10 years, and Diablo 4 just came out and all that, and his stream and his YouTube got a huge bump because he produces good content on it. It's just the following hasn't been as large, but now that they've released a new game, a lot of people have come back to it. He was talking in this YouTube video. He basically put out a thank you video because he had just crossed 100K subscribers on YouTube and 10,000 subs on Twitch. And he was like, this is like life-changing money to me because it opens up so many things I can do with my stream and my YouTube content. And I'm just so thankful that people have been interested, because honestly, I didn't know. I feel like I've been doing this for a long time. But now that there's a new game, there's a new wave of people coming in. I'm glad that they're trusting me for like info on how to do this and how to do that. And I've watched his content, and it's been very useful. And, that's awesome. Like just seeing that for him and listening to, basically, I mean, he wasn't in tears by any means, but you could tell like he was very, very thankful for the community, like basically saying like, thank you for, giving us all this info. Because a lot of the stuff that, this is the first time I've played an RPG like this, and I wouldn't know what I was doing. Like, I had to look up guide after guide after guide, and a lot of them were his. And so, you always put these people on a pedestal, but you never see the people behind it. And him putting that video out there, it was pretty awesome.
Who is the creator, Garrett?
Hold on. His name is DM Diablo 4. His Twitch name
Shout
is
out to him.
Yeah. I looked him up on Twitch earlier because I was watching the video this morning. I think that he posted it this morning. And I went on Twitch because I couldn't find it in the directory because Twitch's freaking searchability is terrible. It's awful.
Discoverability.
The discoverability. And so I fortunately he had a link in his YouTube. So if you go on YouTube and type in DM Diablo 4, you'll find it. He's got good content, but yeah, really awesome for him and what he's doing. But
it's a cool thing. We've experienced this with quite a few creators that we work with, but it's really interesting how some people some people do create certain content and get into certain styles or certain games or certain whatever sub genres of content because they think there's money in it, or they are trying to, just create as much profit as they can. And some are truly just creating the content they love to create. And I think those people stand out. And that's a good example of one who he loves the game. He loves Diablo. He's loved it, for 10 years, like you said. And it just so happens he's finally getting rewarded for it because he makes good content and a new game comes out, he plays it and people kind of find him. And so it's really cool when you get to see that happen for the people who really are creating the content they love. And then they're kind of almost getting rewarded for doing that, for that grind day in, day out, because, this industry has changed a lot. And there's a lot of, the influencer community in general, influencer industry, whatever you want to call it, has changed a lot over the past few years with between TikTok and Instagram and all this. It's all about just people see it as a career path and they're choosing that. But you can kind of sometimes tell the creators who truly just love what they do and the content they produce. And it's cool to see them get rewarded like that.
Yeah. I mean, the person who loves walking walk further than the person who loves the destination, right? I mean, he's like bought into just helping people. Like he's been producing this content, whether views were up or down, he's just, churning away. And so, yeah, to see him get rewarded, that's awesome. Cause you can tell in his videos, like you could tell he genuinely enjoys like making the content and talking about the updates, and he loves the game. And he's just, his YouTube is just an extension of him sharing that, and that's awesome. It makes you happy to see people who are that passionate and successful, right? You love seeing them have some level of success.
Definitely.
But to circle back, yeah, I mean, I think this is a good time for gaming, believe it or not. In June and July, I think it's oftentimes it's really slow in gaming, but we have, we've already talked about, we have a new Warzone map. So Call of Duty's releasing updates, new season in general, right? And then we have COD Champs and we have Diablo 4 that just released, but we have other game titles that are releasing very soon because if anybody watched the Xbox, now I can't even, I'm drawing a blank, but basically all the game reveals that Xbox just had at their big event. There's a lot of good stuff coming down the pike. So we got good games out now. X Defiant's about to come out. We've got good games out, and we've got the games that are out that maybe aren't in the best state. At least they're getting updates, and we've got a lot of games coming. So it's just a good time. A lot to look forward to and a lot to play right this second. So that's good.
Definitely. No, it's exciting stuff. Let's transition on into our topic for the day. And, generally for anybody who's listening to the podcast for the first time, generally speaking, we're going to have 2-3 big topics that we cover in these. We're trying to keep them about an hour or so, which is what we're shooting for. Today, we kind of have a beefy topic that we talked about last week we would get into today. I think it's going to take most of our time. So what that is talking about organizations and specifically esports organizations. And so what we're kind of going to do is we're kind of going to kind of lay out the scene for what orgs are, how they play a role in esports, how they work, how they make money, what their costs are, and then ultimately kind of what the issues surrounding them are. Because for a lot of people that don't know, you might see these orgs and kind of have them on a pedestal and think that they make millions and maybe even billions of dollars, and that just is not the case. So we're going to kind of talk through that today, and kind of give you the information that we know that surrounds it and kind of what the flaws are there. And yeah, so Garrett, let's get right into it. I'm going to let you kick it off. What are organizations? What role do they play in esports? Just kind of get us talking about that a little bit.
Yeah. So an organization in general, as it relates to esports, is basically a group of people who have come together. Generally speaking, in the most simple example, they're playing a single game, right? And how they've come together, it could be for a bunch of different reasons. In a lot of cases, it's a bunch of friends who came together, and they just decided, to go beyond a basic clan, and they're more of an organization now. And what they're probably doing at some level is competing. You also have organizations that are just producing content, and they don't necessarily compete in anything. They're just producing content, and they basically pull all the money together and distribute it out. We'll get more into that later on, because that, in my opinion, is a critical flaw. And so I'm really eager to talk about that. But that's basically what an org is. And if you look around the scene, Call of Duty is the most evident one for us because we service a lot of creators, but it's for almost any gaming title you can think of. You know, any gaming title where there's competition to be had. For example, you know, it was funny because Formal, for example, is a great one. Formal was playing Call of Duty professionally, and he was playing for Optic, and then he just switched over within Optic to play Halo. And so Optic is an example of an organization that plays a bunch of different titles. They compete on a bunch of different levels. But even on the simplest example, you could technically create an organization just to compete in local LANs, right? Local tournaments, stuff like that. And all the winnings, you just distribute them out among the people who are in the organization. If you're going to take it a step further, you could make it a legitimate business and probably register with the state, do all that stuff. So the money comes in, it goes out through a business bank account. But yeah, that's basically what an organization is. It's just a group of people who decided to get together to compete, and they're probably doing it pretty consistently, right? Generally speaking, you don't form an organization just to compete in one event and then disband. So I'm sure it's happened at some point. And that's it. That's really all there is to it. There's nothing, crazy about them. I think when you get to the higher levels, that's where you see kind of the nuance and where different orgs take the direction of the org itself. In this example, LA Thieves will be, a shining example of how to do it. Because when you think LA Thieves, honestly, there are probably people out there who think of LA Thieves and they don't even think about gaming. They think about the actual merch drops that they have. Nadeshot and that team has done a great job of really solidifying a brand image for LA Thieves beyond just gaming, even though that is very much a huge part of what they do. So give me your thoughts. I don't want to ramble about it.
No, yeah, you're good, and you covered a lot of what it is. I think there's kind of two paths, and you noted this at the very beginning. There's orgs. I mean, an organization in general, right, is any business, but orgs specifically pertaining to our industry of content creation, gaming, is kind of what you said. There's orgs that focus specifically on just content creators, and they're essentially agencies basically that fund these content creators, whether they pay them a salary or they just get cuts of brand deals. And they sponsor them to essentially create content around their brand. And then you have the other side, which is esports. And that's, I think, what we're going to kind of dive into today to talk about the esports side of things, because esports has been huge over the past 10 years, but it's been around for going on 20 years now. And, it's kind of evolved in a very interesting way. And so I want to dive in deeper on this because, again, this is a pretty deep topic that we can get into about kind of how they work, right? So, talk, Garrett, a little bit about how do these orgs make money, specifically in the esports realm? You noted on LA Thieves, right, as an example here of they have a merch company, right? They are a merch company. They create merchandise, they sell products on the side, but they also do have teams in multiple different games that compete in esports. So how are these orgs per se, these esports organizations, making their money? What is the goal here? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, for an organization, I think the goal almost is to effectively break even, generally speaking. The way they make the money is, if you're competing, tournament winnings, right? So if you're sending a team to compete, there's going to be a buy-in, and your overall goal from a financial standpoint is to win the tournament and make as much money as possible to at least cover the buy-in, but obviously profit some too if available. And we'll get into that a little bit later and why that's sometimes not even possible. Beyond that, sponsorships. So again, the goal there is to obviously take sponsorships, maybe brand advertisements, stuff like that. It's hard to do unless you do have a successful team, right? So it's almost like the rich get richer here. If you have a good team and your team's performing well, then more brands and companies are going to want to sponsor that team for doing really well. Also, it comes down to views, right? A good example here would be something like Optic Gaming. Regardless of how well they may be performing, they're just one of the most well-known organizations in the Call of Duty scene. And so they're naturally going to get a lot of brand deals that other organizations probably wouldn't get. They've just been around long enough and they've been successful for long enough to warrant that. And then finally, you have merchandise. LA Thieves is the shining example here. Optic and FaZe both do a good job of this as well. They have very loyal customers who are going to buy their merch drops. But when you look at other teams, honestly, the merch probably doesn't sell enough to cover cost. And so it's kind of feast or famine in the space once you get to the higher levels, which is unfortunate because while I think the best should be making more naturally, if they're doing more, they should be making more. At the same time, for the good of the league and everybody who's competing, and in this case, I'm speaking to the COD League and stuff, I think it's good if all teams are having some level of success.
Yeah. Well, we can get into in a minute. What the issues surrounding it are.
Sure.
I just want to kind of lay out for people who maybe don't really understand it at all how they work, right?
Yeah,
So we'll talk about, you kind of touched on 3 different monetization strategies or income revenue streams for these brands, for these orgs specifically. We'll talk about costs here in a minute, and then we can kind of get into what the issue surrounding that is, because as you said, there's definitely an issue with how they are structured. So just to touch on, to follow you up and touch on one thing that you just said there. Basically, those 3 pots that their income falls into is the tournament winnings, the sponsorships and brand deals, and then the third one is the merch, right? Any kind of products that they sell as a brand. Out of those 3, sponsorships is by far heavily weighted, right? I would say that's probably 80%. And in what at least they are dependent upon to bring in their income. Merch is probably the other 15%, and then tournament winnings make up a very small portion. And this is simply because competition. These esports leagues, no matter the game, have become so competitive. We touched on at the beginning, talking about the CDL champs, COD champs today. It's extremely competitive, and so there's not teams dominating the leagues, dominating these esports like there is, like there maybe used to be, or like maybe you would see in traditional sports. And so they're just not winning all these tournaments and becoming dependent upon it. That's just not really happening. So out of those 3 revenue streams, sponsorship is definitely the biggest one. And you see in leagues like the OWL, the CDL, maybe the LCS, the league is generally speaking the one pulling in the sponsorships and then divvying out that money, sponsorship revenue, to the organizations who've bought into that league. And then also you may have the org specifically getting brand deals on its own. Like you mentioned, Optic Gaming, they have partnerships with people like Wingstop and maybe, different companies, right, that they partner with, that they've gotten because of their own brand deals, their own brand building outside of the esport. And this is kind of a flaw we'll get into a little bit later on of why that doesn't work, and why, having an income stream that's not really dependent upon the esport itself, is kind of a flawed thing. And then, like you said, merch, that can be a huge one. I think, honestly, with you take a team like LA Thieves, who's seen extreme success from this, that is really funding a lot of what they do. And for them, maybe it is more of a 50% merch, 40% sponsorship, 5% or 10% winnings. So I think it's different. It's differently weighted for each, but those are good. Those are 3 kind of the main ones that you touched on. Talk about a little bit, Garrett, about what some of these orgs costs are. What are their expenses and why? And then when we kind of close that off, we'll get into why it doesn't make sense and why they're losing money. Yeah,
I mean, the one that sticks out the most is going to be, what they have to pay the players, so salaries in general, and not just the players. I mean, the players are going to be the most expensive part of it, but you're also introducing a lot of overhead that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And so you have coaches.
These are big companies, right? I mean, it's not just the players.
Yeah. I mean, you've got coaches, you've got administrative staff doing things, you've got managers,
the GM, right?
You've got, people all over the board. And again, it's a lot of overhead, considering like your players are going to cost you the most, right? The people actually competing. And it's hard because at the end of the day, this is a service-based business. There's no like actual product outside of the merch itself, which is, I would segment that off, but the competition is service-based. And again, it's going to be based on performance. And so the best teams that are winning constantly, consistently, those players are going to demand higher salaries. The better players are going to demand higher salaries, and you're going to have to pay them, because if you don't, somebody else will. That can eat up, one team a lot faster than it could another, right? And it gets very difficult. You know, you mentioned competition earlier. It gets very difficult to maintain that competition when one team has an almost unlimited payroll and another
Well, and
doesn't.
whenever here in a minute when we talk about kind of who's to blame for all this, I think that's going to be one of the contributing factors is exactly what you're saying. It's just the cost of these salaries is extremely high, and it's honestly way too high relative to the amount of money that's in this industry. So it's
Yeah.
definitely an issue there. What are
Yeah.
some other costs that they have?
You could probably think if you're, thinking logically about this, traveling to events that alone is going to
Sure.
cost a lot of money because you're not only taking the players, you're taking the coaches and whoever else. Um,
When they're not just driving right up the road either, right? They're
no,
flying these people out for maybe a 4-day event. They're probably getting there a week to put, not they're having to put up people for days, multiple people for days.
yeah. Yeah, the travel, you think about just marketing all of these different things, facilities. So, again, Optic with the Hex quarters and, all the different facilities that they have and own. And these facilities could also be owned third party. They may not be owned by the org itself, maybe just rented to the
Right.
org. But if you have to, even just renting a space, right, to do all this.
When this is a high cost industry, right? It's not like renting an office building like we have here. These people are playing on, high level PCs with high level monitors. This equipment and stuff is not cheap. This is something that costs. I mean, we're talking PC, the highest level of PC. We're
Yeah.
talking probably a $6,000-7,000 PC. Monitors are expensive. All this gear is not cheap. You're also probably setting up areas where these players can stream, maybe. So you have to have very good internet, probably cameras, all these things. It's not a cheap facility.
No, not at all. And ironically, that's probably one of the cheapest parts of of the org. Out of everything I just named, the
Yeah.
travel is probably pretty cheap comparatively speaking to everything else, and that's still a chunk of money. But yeah,
I
final.
remember before you go
Yeah,
off
yeah,
of that with just the travel specifically. I watched a video by Devin Nash, which we'll probably reference him a lot because a lot of my knowledge surrounding this space is from him. He spoke to when he had a team in the LCS that they were averaging upwards of $250,000 a month in travel expenses.
yeah, yeah. The larger the org as well, and the more events you're having to go to. You think about the big ones like LA Thieves and Optic competing in several different events.
Oh yeah,
It's easy for us to just think of Optic and think of COD and then maybe Halo
yep.
if you're familiar with Formal and stuff like that. But they've got,
They have Rocket League, they have
yeah,
Apex, they have all these teams, and they might be competing on the same weekend in 5 different cities, and each of those teams maybe has 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 people surrounding it. I mean, you're talking about a lot of travel costs.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot. And, in all of that, slap on a $25 million franchise fee or something like that,
Right?
and, just call it a day.
You're
So,
starting to see where this might become an issue.
all of these things you wouldn't have if four friends got together and said, hey, let's compete in the COD league. You would have the franchise fee, but
Right.
all these other things you wouldn't necessarily have, at least not to the extent that some of these orgs have, because there's what
Right.
I'm going to call it bloat. I don't know another way around it, but it's effectively bloat, and it's just things you have to pay for that aren't really generating any revenue, but you have to have them.
Right.
And it's just really difficult for an org to stay successful financially when this is the case. And so,
Mhm.
we'll get into all of it as we go. But yeah, with all these costs, it's, what we talked about first with the ways to monetize just does not cover all the things we just talked about in costs. The math
And
doesn't add up.
that gets us to ultimately where you guys probably listening have kind of started to see a little bit into why maybe um, why they don't make money, because ultimately what you just said, Garrett, is the truth, is that all these expenses are far greater than those revenue line items. We talked about how obviously tournament winnings they're not able to depend on those because it's just very, very hard to win at a high level consistently. And then with sponsorships and brand deals that they're, kind of dependent upon, or even merch, those take so much time and so much effort separate from the actual competition in the esport itself, that being dependent upon that source of revenue when it's almost inherently separate from actually the winning, the game, winning in these competitions, it really starts to almost pull against itself. And I think that's really what you see with a lot of these orgs that maybe have only been in certain leagues for a few years, or maybe they're in 1 year and then they're gone, is that they are just losing so much cash month by month that it just doesn't make sense. No matter how much they love it or how much they want to be in it, they can't turn a profit. And I think it's for a few reasons that we've already named, but one of the main ones is and if you are familiar with Optic or you follow them, is the content, right? These guys, if they're dependent upon brand deals and they're dependent upon the sponsorship revenue, what do they have to do to get that? Well, they have to do the same thing that other content creators, solo content creators that stream on Twitch every day have to do. They have to build a brand. They have to create content around their brand. What are what are these players who play in esports leagues? What are they doing all day long? They're practicing. The best players in these leagues, they play 12, sometimes even 15 hours a day to play the game to be at the highest level. They don't have time to create content. They don't have time to build this brand up with the owners and with all the people doing the marketing for the brand. And I think that's one of the biggest issues you see is, like I said, if you watch Optic, you see the players always constantly complaining about content days. And it's because they're trying to win. They want to be good at the game, not make YouTube videos. But both are kind of necessary in order for the org to even survive.
Yeah, I mean, you have to grind. It's the nature of it, because of the economics of it don't work unless you do that. And once you get into big levels, and I think we probably should have started with this, because this is a major issue with it. Why are we talking about this in the first place? Well, I mean, if you've looked around just the space in general, FaZe's stock price is down. They're the only publicly traded esports org out there, really. And then you look at the other orgs that have done massive layoffs recently, FaZe included, but New York, a lot of just esports orgs in general have made layoffs across the board.
Yep.
And it's just a downtime. And the reason this is happening is because the economy is somewhat down. When money was flowing during COVID and VC money was coming in constantly, all these orgs were hiring up, creators left and right, and they were hiring up, they were funding esports teams left and right, and the big money was coming in. That has dried up because the investment overall, people expect to see returns, and that it just has not produced. So now that the money is gone, layoffs are happening. You're seeing a lot of negative news surrounding it. FaZe's stock price is dropping, and that is what kind of triggers the conversation. And plus why are we talking about it? Well, one reason is we've worked with orgs and we see the financials and we know, how all this works. In a lot of cases, when you take something like Optic or LA Thieves, it's the same thing with more zeros on the end of it. And so we've seen it firsthand, the behind the scenes, and economically speaking, we can speak to why it doesn't work. Now, this doesn't mean that a lot of these orgs aren't serving a good purpose. It doesn't mean that they're not, doing awesome things. It just means but that's what the public's going to see. It just means that behind the scenes, it's just not feasible from what we've seen. I haven't found a good way yet to truly monetize this in a way that is sustainable over time. I couldn't tell you an org that's actually turning a profit year over year. And if one is, I would be very impressed. And that goes even for LA Thieves. I do not know their financials or their situation, but I do know that they have secured a lot of funding, money coming in from people like Drake, very notable people. But I would be willing to bet they don't turn a profit. And it's not, I'm not hating on them by any means. I love LA Thieves. I love Optic, but this industry is just very, very difficult because of a couple of things that we're about to get to.
Yeah. I mean, what in total, what would you say, and we can both discuss this a little bit, but what is kind of the why behind it? Why is it a structure problem? What has caused this, I guess, downward spiral that seems to be spiraling down from the very beginning?
Yeah. It's actually simple. Most of the titles are publisher led. And so that's a big component of it. And then branding.
What do you mean by that? Speak on that a little bit for maybe the listener who doesn't really understand that terminology.
Yeah. So A publisher would be somebody who's developing the game title that we're referring to.
So
So in this
Activision
case,
Blizzard, the person
Activision.
who
Yeah,
creates Call of Duty.
yeah, exactly. So Activision Blizzard with Call of Duty, um, Activision Blizzard with Diablo. Like it doesn't matter the game, whoever's producing it. And
Sure.
in the situation with Call of Duty, Activision is the one pulling all the strings. They're the ones that are controlling everything. The COD League, what decisions are being made. Now, the COD League itself, the group of owners that own the individual teams, they do have say and sway in this. But at the end of the day, Activision is the one that's going to make all the final decisions. The move from Twitch to YouTube is going to basically be what Activision decides it's going to be. Now, again, the owners of the teams do have a meeting to go over all these things with representatives from Activision Blizzard, because ultimately everybody in the room wants it to be successful. And so it is very important to get all those minds in the same room.
But it's more of what is their say and opinion, not they are the ultimate decision maker in, say, something more like a traditional sport like the NFL with NFL National Football League, where the teams actually own the league, right?
Yep.
The teams are making decisions because they actually own the league. They have the final say. Esports is not set up that way. And that's where when you say at the beginning, it's publisher led, it's publisher driven. The CDL is owned by Activision. They get the say, and they also own the game, and they also are the one making changes to the game. And so these teams are ultimately at their mercy. And there's a lot of reasons why that's a problem. Number one being they're requiring these teams to have a $25 million buy-in. And then they're also taking a cut off the top of all the sponsorship revenue that the league makes.
A big
and then
cut.
Just distributing a big cut.
Yeah.
And then they're just distributing that to the orgs, and there's 12 teams in the CDL, just using the CDL for example, since that's the one we've been talking about. And so then the orgs are just seeing a tiny little piece of that. Meanwhile, they're paying, $25 million over whatever 10 years to get into the league to begin with. And so you start to see where this is a very large issue.
Yeah, and I mean,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, not trying to talk over you. I mean, because you hit the nail on the head. That was the second part of what I was going to say was, there's a branding image to it. Is like Activision owns all this and they're doing all this and they're pulling the strings and saying all this, but then they have 120,000 viewers on Twitch when the matches are being played, and champs I would expect maybe a little bit higher, but using the same comparison to the NFL, bro, that's nothing. Like 120,000 eyes on the CDL when it's like the championship weekend, that's a joke to something like the NFL. And so there's an overall branding aspect of it, right? That the NFL has, and the brand that they've built, to where they can afford to pay these players exorbitant amounts and whatnot. All the teams can, because the actual monetization and the sponsorships and deals that the NFL is getting is so far and above what Activision is going to be able to pull. And then take a cut off.
This goes back to exactly what you're saying. This goes back to kind of our conversation on last podcast, talking about the Twitch deal and going to YouTube and all this. Is with leagues like the NFL, and the MLB and all these, right? They're getting funded by media rights. They're getting funded by paid programming and being on TV. With esports not in that same realm yet, then you have to look at, okay, well, how do we monetize viewership? Well, it's through sponsorship and brand deals. What we talked about last week in the last week's episode, which I recommend you guys go listen to, why that's a problem. Because now you have, let's call it 400,000 viewers on Champs this weekend, on COD Champs. How do you monetize that? They're watching it for free on Twitch or on YouTube. They're not really paying anything. And then, okay, now you have some brands that want to work with the COD League. But if they're not able to monetize that at a high level, then these orgs that are just paying $25 million in franchise fees are getting screwed, because it's basically, fight for your own. And that's why you see these teams or these organizations like Optic, like LA Thieves, doing other things outside of themselves, outside of Call of Duty, outside of Overwatch, outside of LCS, outside of these games, is because why is LA Thieves, why has Nade Shot built Juvie, a product brand for a drink? It's because that is something that can actually make real money, and they can productize it, versus they're not making money from the COD League. They just can't. And expenses are so high. They're doing the same things the NFL are doing. They're flying these players out. They have the same expenses, all the same staff, all these things. and heck, even salaries, which we can talk about in a second, are so high, but the revenue is just not there.
And why is it Activision led, Joseph? I'm asking you the question now. Why won't Activision just say, okay, well, the teams own it? Why wouldn't they give that up?
Well, ultimately, I think it's because they're greedy, and I think that they set it up this way from the beginning, and they know that from the beginning, taking Call of Duty for an example, like we have been, the CWL, the Call of Duty World League that used to go on, that was just happening completely outside of Activision, right? It was something that people like me and you basically said, "Hey, we want to have a team. Let's fund this team. We're going to send these players." Boom, they went. There was brands surrounding it, but Call of Duty saw none of that money. Activision saw none of that money, and they're playing their game. And so ultimately, they want their cut. And that's where they said, "You know what? We're not doing this anymore. You're not allowed to compete in our game unless you do it through the Call of Duty League, and we own that. And if you want to play in it, then it's
And so
$25 million franchise."
you're telling me when you buy a copy of Call of Duty, that's written into the terms of service? Is that what you're telling me? That you can't compete, basically? Because that's what it sounds
Well,
like.
what I'm telling you is that they want their cut,
Yeah.
and they're going to get it. And they are a billion-dollar company that has basically said, how can we do that? We can structure it like this. And I think that at the end of the day, and this is probably the probably affects all esports in general. They don't really care if the competitive Call of Duty side thrives because they're a competitive game at heart. I mean, they're a casual game at heart, and they're going to service the casual community. And this whole Call of Duty League thing is just to get their cut of the pie.
Yep. Yep. And if they honestly
Um,
didn't see a profit from it, and I promise you, Activision is probably seeing a profit off of it. I
well, and
promise
even
you,
if
they're getting
this
some
is a
kind of
big
money from it.
conversation, this is a big conversation with it, right? And we touched on this last week, I think, but with the OWL, with the Overwatch League, which is structured very similar to CDL, they came out and basically said they were going to waive some of the franchise fees, and this sparked a whole conversation of basically there was teams that still owed $7 to $10 million in franchise fees, and the OWL was saying we're gonna wipe them, and I don't think it's actually gone through yet, but they were basically just going to give relief for it. The thing with that is with a billion-dollar company like Activision, they could lose money on these leagues forever and they would be fine. They could lose millions of dollars on these leagues, on all of their leagues over time, every single year, and it wouldn't matter. The fact is they're not willing to do that. And so they're gonna do everything they can to break even. And I think that's why you see these deals like they're going to stream exclusively on YouTube next year. They see that as a media rights deal where we can get paid to do it on YouTube versus Twitch is free. We're not going to do that.
So, Joseph, imagine for me a world where the league owners or the team owners, they own the league itself, and they are able to collectively come to an agreement with YouTube or Twitch or whoever to stream, and Activision is effectively cut out. If I'm being honest, I think in that sense, one, from a branding perspective, you're giving teams more flexibility to be who they are and do
Right.
kind of what they want to do, especially when it comes to merch and stuff like that. There's no,
Mhm.
red tape or anything like that. They can just do what they need to do to be successful. I think that takes the branding of esports in general through the roof, right? Because now, a lot of people love the NFL. They don't want to watch the XFL because of how tight knit, like with the NFC and the AFC, and that it's just so established at this point. It could be that way with the CDL, but there have been talks this year is like, I don't even know if the CDL is going to be a thing in a couple of years, right?
And I think a lot of people that don't understand it are justifying that point you just made of, well, it's just new. Esports as a whole isn't new.
It's
It's
not.
been around.
Yeah.
And leagues like the LCS, League of Legends, that's not new. And if you look at the trend back to 2012, 2013, 2014, it was at an all-time high. And it's right now at an all-time low with teams like TSM and Team Liquid and stuff leaving because there's no money in it and they're losing money year over year and they can't survive. This problem of or this solution of just saying, well, it's just new. The NFL has been around for however many 50 years, whatever it's been. We just need to give it more time. Esports is just new. The Call of Duty League is new, but this structure is not new and it's not sustainable. And I think that we can talk about here in a second, which is kind of the next point on the list, is like what is the fix to it? Um, there's not really a fix. It's gonna fall down to the publisher of one reducing these franchise fees, honestly probably putting some kind of salary cap to where, I mean, I don't know if whoever the listeners are right now, I'm not sure if you guys even know, but I mean, there's in the Call of Duty League, there's people getting paid salaries of upwards of 300, 400, $500,000 a year to play the game. You're talking about 4 players on the team. In teams that play CS and League of Legends, you're talking about $1 million salaries for players. These salaries are astronomical, and they do not equate at all to what the revenue that's coming in is. And so, I think that that could be maybe a fix, is putting a salary cap. But then you're talking about players who are used to making hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions a year, being brought way, way down. And then it's like, okay, well, now who's going to compete in it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, okay. So tell me this kind of, sparks this question from me then. With Kick doing the things that they're doing, competing with Twitch, and they're trying to be different, do you see a title ever coming out from a developer, or a publisher that says, you know what, we're going to let you guys take this and run with it and develop your own quote unquote league? So let's jump back to X Defiant, for example. And I know Ubisoft Sure. is the one developing that.
Yep.
So let's say Ubisoft says, you know what, X Defiant, there's going to be a competitive scene, but we're going to have nothing to do with it. We're going to let you guys take it over because you guys are better at it, and you're going to market it better. And let the owners come together and figure all these things out. Do you see that ever happening? And I know you just kind of answered this, but do you see any game title or any developer publisher basically saying, we're going to sacrifice the money for the betterment of the league itself, because ultimately they'll get their cut from more copies sold and whatnot when the game blows up? Do you ever see that happening?
No, I don't. I don't think. I mean, short answer is no. I really don't think that these companies that are multi-million-dollar, even billion-dollar companies, like the top of the top, I don't think they're ever going to do that, because I think they're ultimately driven by money, and that is what they are trying to do. And I don't think that they're going to let people play their title and do what they want with it per se, without them seeing a cut of that. I do think there's a world where the capital gets adjusted a bit, and the franchise fees get reduced, and salary caps get put on, and orgs are able to potentially bounce back by what they've built. But I think this is a long-term thing, and I think it's going to take these these publishers, excuse me, working with these leagues and seeing what you're kind of talking about as far as the betterment of it. I don't think that soon. I think that it's going to take some change in leadership to be able to do that. And I think that's probably part of the reason that you see, the League of Legends suffering like it has, is that a lot of those good people that started that out and were running these events and were doing all of it have left. And you're even seeing that with Call of Duty, right? Scump retired this year. And I'm not just talking about the players, but Scump retired this year. Crim6 retired last year. The players are the branding, and those players are leaving. And then, inadvertently, leadership is also leaving. These people are tired of the space. They're tired of the publishers not working with them. They're tired of all the struggles that come along with it that we kind of outlined through today's episode. And some of those people are leaving, and it's going to take a big change in order for this to maybe work in the future.
Yeah, and to bring it back to accounting a little bit, I'll tell you the reason this is never going to happen. What truly goes on behind the scenes is every quarter the CEO has to get in front of a bunch of people and answer to them, the investors,
the money,
the board of directors, and the CEO. If he or she does not have an answer, what's going to happen is they are going to be replaced by somebody who does have an answer, and the answer is always, where's the money? Because investors want the dividends. That's all they want.
A good answer to that question is not, well, we're losing money, but we really like the league and we're just doing it for the betterment of the league. That doesn't work.
That's not going to work. That's never going to work, because at the end of the day, the CEO is beholden to what the investors want. And the first time that they pay out a dividend or show profit, it is expected from there on out. And if it does not happen, they will be replaced. And what they will always, always, always do every single time, and this is not a knock to them, I understand why it happens, but what they will always do is they will always take the short-term profit over the long-term gains. If it benefits the league, they don't care. It is not about the league. It is about showing a profit. Yep, that's why if Activision does not show a profit on the CDL, it may be 2 years, it could be 3 years, but if they're not making money, it will stop. This is big. This is business. It is not like the people are not going to allow it to go on not making money, because as much as the CEO may care, the investors don't. They want returns on their investment. That is it. That's the only reason they put money in the company. And you could say whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. It doesn't matter. That's just the way it is. And so to Joseph's point, we won't see a change for the betterment of the league unless it drives more revenue very quickly. And revenue very quickly is almost impossible. What they will always revert back to what they've done in the past to make them money. Right. It's a sad state of affairs, but that's just the nature of business and how it goes. So,
yeah, at a high level, especially like you're talking about these numbers, these are not small numbers, and a lot of these people that are funding this stuff, they have a lot of money, but they have a lot of money for a reason. They're not going to just funnel it into a trash can.
If you ever had an indie developer make one, yeah, you might see it, but the problem there is you're not going to have probably a massive league surrounding an indie developed game. But that would be the only reprieve you ever get, is if somebody did something, if somebody created a game and then said, I'm creating this for the soul. And that's why X Defiant is very promising, is because it's led by players, but ultimately Ubisoft is going to make the final decisions.
Right.
I can tell you exactly what Ubisoft is going to do. I don't need to, there's not much discussion around that, as much as it is a player-led movement. The game will feel great.
And I want to transition us a little bit on that, because we have a few more points I want to talk about before we hop off. And what you just said kind of gets into it is player-led, right? There is something interesting happening inside of some of these organizations and some of these leagues where there's actually some creators that have got into, some large creators, some that you guys may have heard of listening, of creator-led orgs, right? They decided these creators are really big on YouTube, really big on Twitch. They built a brand for themselves, saying, you know what, I want to have an esports team. I want to fund a team in the LCS, right? Or some of these other leagues. And what you've actually seen is that they're actually doing a lot better than some of these orgs that have been around for 20 years. And there's a reason behind that. And it's what we've been saying is they have a brand. They have created content on YouTube or on Twitch or around their name for so many years. They've built an audience of millions of people that will buy whatever they say to buy, and they will support whatever they say to support. And so they're seeing success. These orgs are seeing success because it is creator led. And honestly, that's some of the only orgs in the industry that are doing well right now, is the ones that are led by these people. And you actually have seen some popular people talk more about getting into. I think XQC recently said he might want to get into have a team in some of these different leagues. And it's because they realize maybe those orgs can't build a brand and sell sponsorships, but we can. I can. I have enough followers on Twitch, enough followers on YouTube that I can fund this team, because essentially they're using their YouTube revenue and their Twitch revenue to fund the team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because these are recent developments. I mean, this has not been around for a long time, and I think it keeps esports at its roots, right? When Ludwig or some of these other creators go out and they're the ones doing it, because they truly are trying to do it for the benefit of not just the game, but overall content creation surrounding that specific game, whatever they're playing. They're doing it for the betterment of that, and they're trying to truly do something that, their mind is on just bringing everybody up compared to like.
They're doing it because they like the game. They're
doing it because they're
exactly what
it's
you
not
said,
about
for the
profit.
betterment of it.
It's not about, because when a corporate, person walks in, they want to see profit. Like that's all they care about. And I understand that. I do understand why that happens. And oftentimes if they're the ones bringing the money to the table, they're entitled to that. But in the case of Ludwig and these other creators, they have the money. They've already got it. So they're bringing it they're bringing that knowledge as well. And I think those are the best run orgs, because then you have true synergies in place. You're not, anybody in that org who's talking about doing this or that, they're all coming to it from a background of content creation already. And so they just get it. And, I hope it's incredibly successful. I'm interested to see how it turns out. Ultimately, you do need to see a profit, but it doesn't need to be to the extent that, Ubisoft or Activision needs to see it. So it doesn't have to be short term. This can be something that they can take their time and get it right, and that's the
And I
best.
think to the salaries conversation and just all the expenses that we talked about, it's going to take, I think, dramatically reducing the financial aspect of all of it.
Yeah.
Is the reducing salaries, reducing cost, reducing all of it, reducing franchise fees, and really kind of almost just bringing it all down to earth of like, okay, what is like a reasonable salary for these people to make? What is a reasonable events cost? What is reasonable, amount of travel to have? And because right now it's all just so inflated, and that's what's causing a lot of the problems. So, anyways, to wrap this up a little bit, I know we're coming up on an hour now.
I'm
What
impressed we
is the
kept
kind of
that. I'm impressed we kept that to like right at an hour. I mean, because we did start late, so that's pretty impressive. I mean,
sure,
that's a
sure,
big,
yeah,
heavy topic, and we were able to get through it. If anybody
it is,
listening to
yeah.
this after the fact wants more information, we'd be happy to talk about this more because there's still even stuff that goes into it. But like we're doing pretty good, keeping it at just an hour.
It's a very deep conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, we kind of hit the high spots. I mean, I think we talked a lot using the example of the CDL, but I mean, all of the leagues, even Rocket League and Halo, like you're talking about, they all are experiencing these things, and we could use different examples. It might be fun to kind of do almost case study by case study, do some in future episodes to kind of talk about some other examples. But kind of in conclusion, I think what I kind of see from it, and what if you look at it as a whole. I think the storylines and stuff around esports have just kind of been lost a little bit. I think through the competition growing and increasing, and through um, it being more focused on the money and more focused on who's going to win, and less on the storylines and the brands and content around it of giving people a reason to watch. I think that's been a big problem, and that's been lost a little bit, and I think that's why you've seen a lot of this happen. I mean, just to conclude us, Garrett, speak a little bit on what kind of you think the future of it looks like, and maybe some ways we might see it go in the next, call it, 5 years.
Yeah, I think you know, it, sadly enough, I think there are more layoffs inbound. I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to see more and more teams back out and in a way die out, just because again, COVID was so good to some of these teams, and I think people built unrealistic expectations on money coming in. That's the sad truth. Ultimately some of these orgs, even the ones that are player led, if they're not making money and they can't sustain it, they truly have to bow out. Whereas something like Optic or LA Thieves, they can buy themselves a little bit more time just because they have the resources. So I think you're going to see a lot of the smaller orgs, truly continue to die out, which is sad. But at the same time, I do think that esports in general is picking up steam. I think, with the COD League this year, they probably had more viewership than they have in the past, which is good. As long as that continues to grow and people get more and more involved, I think the culture around gaming in general is becoming much more favorable. People are playing these titles and these games a lot more than they did in the past, and that can only help the game. So I'd say in the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of the smaller orgs. You're going to see some attrition there, and they're going to continue to die out. But you're going to see growth overall in the gaming industry and the gaming space, because these things are cyclical. And while COVID, the funding was really good at that one time, and we're kind of down right now, it will come back. It will come back. And the more these teams get eyes on them, the more other investors will be interested in putting money into the scene and the space. Just with what we do alone, I mean, how many, Joseph, since we started Game On Financial, how many people have we seen come into the space that are third party vendors? And, we're meeting these companies. These companies are starting up out of thin air, creating custom built PCs. And you have an accounting firm coming into the space and saying, we're going to focus only on content creators and esports athletes.
Yeah.
You have attorneys coming into the space, and that's just in the past couple of years. I think as that continues to happen and we kind of get more structure to it, overall esports as a whole benefits. And so
Yeah.
it'll be a rough road to get there, but in the next 5 years, 10 years, I definitely see that happening. There will be more structure, and it'll be much more well received going forward, but long road to get there. Definitely. We're going to see some attrition, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely. And Garrett, I hope you can hear me a little bit. I'm breaking up on my end when you were speaking just then, so I hope you can hear me okay. But yeah, I mean exactly what you said, and I think in closing, I mean I think there's a structural flaw with how these orgs are set up, how they make money, and the leagues that they're in. And I think the teams you see doing it well are doing the things that are really bringing in revenue sources outside of these leagues. And the better they can do that, the more they can do that, the longer they'll be able to hang on. And I think it is through what you said, through building a content creation team, through allowing people outside of esports to kind of funnel people into those sports, into those leagues. And so it is exciting to see some of these teams, that new ones getting into it, and it is exciting to work with a lot of the creators surrounding it. I think that's where we kind of strike a chord with this topic, is that we do work with a lot of creators that are involved with some of these teams and organizations, and that's cool for us to be able to kind of see their experience through it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that by any means we're saying that all of esports is doomed, but I do think that there's gonna be some serious changes that'll have to happen um, at the top end and at the really structural level before it can really excel and grow to what we've seen traditional sports grow to.
Yeah, a lot of these problems will fix themselves. The money will take care of itself. It'll get there. But good news is, at the end of the day, the economy is cyclical, so it'll come back. Cyclical. There's the word again. I gotta get Jake in here to watch. But yeah, it'll come back, and the money will come back, and we'll probably we'll look back on this and laugh at some point and talk about all the changes that have happened since then. But yeah, this was a good episode.
Definitely.
I was really happy to hop in here and talk about this, because it's a fun topic for me. I think we bring a unique view to it, just because we've seen the actual financials behind the scenes of these orgs, and it's probably not what a lot of people would expect. You look at some of these esports orgs and you're like, man, that's awesome. You think of some of these creators and they're like, oh man, they just got signed to whatever organization. Right. Like, that's so cool. When in reality, the organization is truly struggling. Right. It's just, I don't think it's everything it's built up to be. And I think everybody's like, oh, go get signed to an org, go get signed to an org. And it's just not necessary. The best thing you can do, create your personal brand. Right. Create your personal brand, and then make it so that any org would be happy to have you. And once that's the case, then you can make your pick on what org you decide.
Creating your own value kind of for yourself. And
absolutely.
I think that's the creators that we've seen involved in esports or not involved in esports. Those have been the most successful ones who have been able to do that. So yeah, I mean, in closing, definitely interesting topic. I think I hope we added value to some people who maybe didn't know some of that stuff. Definitely probably could dive deeper, and in the future I'm sure we'll see with different ownership changes or league changes. I'm sure we'll probably talk more about this topic in the future. But shout out to everybody watching this on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are not already, to bring more content like this. We're super excited to be kicking off this podcast. It's only our 3rd episode and we're really enjoying doing it. So we do have guests coming on in the future. We're sorting some of those details out now. And yeah, we're loving doing it. So appreciate the love, Garrett. I guess until next week.
Until next week. Peace.
See ya.